everybody, welcome back to Old World Legends, where we focus on growing the community. I'm your host, Mike, and with me as always is Evan.
Weapons is a movie that came out recently, but we're talking about Warhammer Fantasy Weapons.
Yes, Warhammer, the Old World weapons. So yes, we're continuing our beginner series where we're walking through the rule book and explaining how things work to everybody, both for new players and for veterans. Maybe there's a couple tidbits that you missed. So Evan, let's dive in, sir.
Yeah, so I think this section is not as often messed up, but hey, there are some things in here that can trick people. For one, what's the difference between a close combat weapon and a ranged weapon? Can you use a ranged weapon when you're in close combat? Those are maybe some really new player questions to ask, but these are things that we're going to point out to you. Okay.
Yep. So let's dive into that. So I think that's the biggest difference there is, and keep in mind that when you roll to hit, it is different whether you're in melee versus whether you're in range. So don't get it is you will see a lot of stats very similar for a ranged weapon and a melee weapon, but they are the way you use them are different.
Yeah.
We did cover a lot of those mechanics in our previous videos when we went through going into close combat, when we went through the shooting phase of the game, but let's dive into the specifics of the individual ones then.
Right. So this is breaking down a profile. Now, ironically, it's using the Flail profile, which is one of the ones that got changed in the FAQ, but we'll go through that as we go. First off, in the weapon profile, you have the range. So if it says range combat, that means it's a close combat weapon and only a close combat weapon. You can't shoot anyone with it. It's just for that. And then if
now, it doesn't
say
ranged on the stats. It just says R.
Yeah,
but as you see here in the rule book, they're abbreviating it. It means range of the weapon.
Right. And you can only direct combat against enemies you're in combat with. You have to be in the fighting rank. All those rules went through before. If the range is number inches, then that means it's a missile weapon. You can shoot it at the enemy, and you cannot use it in combat. So you can't use crossbows when you're in combat, for example.
No, you cannot.
You can see and shoot as long as they charge you from far enough, and we talked about that in the previous sections.
One of the biggest questions everyone will have is, well, wait a second, I only have a bow or a crossbow. What do I use if I'm in combat? So one thing that is in the book, and I forget what section, but it basically says, even if it doesn't say you have a hand weapon, everyone in the game has a hand weapon. So if you default to, I don't have a weapon I can use in combat, or my magic weapon got destroyed, or I can't use my magic weapon now, or I have a lance, what do? You always then revert to you just have a close combat weapon. So it's just assumed whatever your model is, they have a dagger, or they have a club, or they have a sword, or they have a stick, or they just have something, or a rock, big old rock, and that they pull out and then just start wailing on you. And basically, you have literally no advantage in a basic hand weapon. You just use your base profile of your model itself. So it's you use your weapon skill, your strength, and it has no AP. So that's what it means. We're like, well, how do everyone always has a hand weapon. You can always punch somebody in the face. So that's what it lets you do.
Right.
Let's move on.
The other thing about the range is that if it's two numbers, like between 12 and 60 inches, this means you have to be at least 12 inches away, and you measure to the closest model. So, for example, this is a stone thrower, has a range of 12 to 60. If any part of the unit is closer than 12, you cannot shoot at the unit, even though the stone thrower would go to the center of the unit, which might be over 12 away. Part of the unit's within 12, therefore it's too close. So that's something people get wrong. Also, when you measure distance to see if you're in range of something, you measure the closest model with a shooting weapon, even if you can't see that model. So when you fire a crossbow at an enemy unit, you don't draw a line of sight and then measure the line of sight's distance. You measure to whatever guy is closest to you, regardless of whether you can even see that guy. That's also throws people off, I think, as well. Because the rules for how you measure distance between units is closest to closest, not pick a certain path that makes some level of sense and draw that distance, right? That's not how it works. Okay, the strength. Now, the strength of weapons is in close combat is usually based on the strength of the user to some degree, with like bonuses, like +1, for example, or +2. And then ranged weapons are much more commonly a flat, fixed amount. So a crossbow is always strength 4, regardless of who's firing it.
Yeah. So that's what that's representing there. You'll see the difference there. Exactly right. So for ranged weapons, it will just almost always tell you a flat number. It's 3, it's 4, it's 8. Or sometimes it will give you two numbers. It will say it's 4 and then brackets 8. And effectively it means normally if you hit with it, it's 4, but under the center of the hole in a template, that person who gets hit by that's an 8. So sometimes you'll see two profiles, but they're flat numbers for ranged weapons because that's the strength of the projectile itself. Hits something.
Right.
But when you're using a melee weapon, your physical strength of the model, how strong, and then it adds the strength if the weapon happens to add strength to it. Not all weapons do, right? Your basic hand weapon doesn't add strength, but a lance, as an example, adds +2 strength, but there's a caveat only on the charge versus a great weapon. Some will add +1, +2, +3. That's why you see S plus something. It's meaning the strength of the base model itself. And if you have a magic item or spell that's enhancing the strength of your model, guess what? You get to add that as well because it's the strength of your model plus any modifiers to the strength of that model. Penalties, if you're debuffed, then you add the weapon.
Right.
What the weapon gives you.
Then there are special rules. Now, what some people might get wrong is that the special rules only apply when you're using that weapon. So, for example, if the weapon is giving you poisoned attacks, it does not give you poison attacks for every other model in the unit or for your bow. So only if the weapon itself, and you're using that weapon to attack, can you use the bonus that specific weapon gives you. Sometimes its downsides, like require 2 hands, is a negative. Now, requires 2 hands is a rule for fighting in combat with a specific weapon like a flail, but that does not mean you use the 2 hands to hold your flail when you're not in combat. So a unit can have shields that they use against ranged attacks to help protect them, and then also have a flail that they pull out in combat, and they just don't use the shield in combat. So that is possible, and people do very often do that.
And then we missed AP. Let's make sure to go over that real quick.
Yeah, I mean, AP is just how much you lower the dice roll for an armor save by. So if you have AP 2 and someone has a 3+ armor save, it goes from a 3 to a 5+ on the dice. So they have to roll a 5 or 6 to actually still pass their save.
That's why when you look at the AP or armor piercing value of the weapon, you'll see it will go. It says not +2, it says -2. It's saying that's how much their armor is reduced by because of what this weapon does. And again, you could sometimes see brackets or different things for AP because some weapons have special abilities like Armor Bane or such, depending on the dice roll. If you roll a 6, it could cause additional AP and such. But those are all specified in the special rules, and we'll go through some of the examples here. But basically, we see AP, it's going to be a minus because it's reducing the enemy's armor by that much. So the larger the minus, the better the AP value of the weapon is.
Right. So fun fact, there's some FAQ changes here. So for example, this one is got totally removed. But when you have more than one combat weapon, like having a lance and a hand weapon, then you can choose which one you want to use during the choose and fight phase. This is before everyone does any attacks. You say, okay, my guys are going to be using their lances or they're going to be using their shields. Now, this comes up a lot more now because you can actually pick this on subsequent rounds of combat. Previously, you were stuck. Once you picked you wanted to use your great weapons on your dwarf hammerers, then the next round of combat, you couldn't switch to your hand weapon and shield. You had to just stick with whatever you already had equipped. Now, this ability to do that now invalidates this section of the book right here, but it is way more interesting to actually play because every round you're like, well, maybe I actually just want to go defensive and try not to take damage this turn.
Yeah, it's great. It's so much more fun to have that option, that strategy. Oh, I'm going to get charged, so let's use our shields this time to improve our armor save and get the parry save if we're infantry, right? To absorb the charge better. And then, hey, it's round 2. We survived. Okay, now let's great weapons or something else, right? Or, oh, we're doing the charge, so actually we're going to strike first, so we want to use the lances or something, or versus the... There's just so much more interesting nuance and complexity. Now, not all units have multiple weapons. Some units just have one. Now, remember, you always have your hand weapon. That's always true, and such. So you might say, even if you don't have shields, you might say, well, the great, but they make me strike last. I'd rather use hand weapon because I'd rather punch the opponent first, so I don't have the strike last penalty. So technically, almost if you give a unit an additional weapon, a halberd, flail, a great weapon, anything else, you still have that hand weapon. So you still always have that as a choice.
Most commonly, it's when I'm infantry, do I choose to use my hand weapon shield for parry, or do I choose to use anything else? Because it's usually a spear or a halberd or a great weapon or whatever.
Yeah.
So that's your choice. It's between those two things. And keep in mind,
more offense or more defense. That's typically what it is.
And there is a rule that isn't here, but is elsewhere that says if you have a magic weapon, you always have to use it. A ton of people buy a magic sword, like a, let's just say the Dragon Slayer sword, for example, and then they also buy a flail, and they're like, cool, I'll just pick which one I want to use, because it feels so intuitive that I'd be able to, I don't know, Mike, sheath my sword and put it to my side when I don't want to use it. But no, you are not allowed to do that. If you buy a magic weapon, you have to
So
use it at all
the
times.
reason why
Weird.
clearly they're doing that in this edition versus previous editions, the reason why, and they had the same problem in 40K, is because, oh, I'm in a combat situation where I don't want to slaughter my opponent. It's far more advantageous to me to, slap them, tickle them, and not kill them because I want us to stay exactly where we're at and I don't want to kill him. And so basically, smart, clever veteran players would exploit the system and say, oh, I don't want to kill this unit this turn because I don't want to get shot by your cannon. So I'm going to charge in here, and my big old Chaos Lord is going to just use his little dagger to, I killed the guy, I didn't kill 6. And now, oh, great, I'm stuck in combat in your turn. Now I pull out my big old magic weapon, and guess what? Your cannons don't get to shoot me on your turn. That is what always happened in other editions. That is why this rule exists now. It sounds silly, but I'm telling you, Evan, this is a very important rule because it was total bullcrap and totally exploitative the way it happened. So that's a good rule.
Sure.
Trust me.
Then one addendum to that: the Dragon Slayer sword should allow you to pick.
Well, they could always make the magic weapons more interesting, but my point is there's a reason why
Yeah.
they have that as a core rule,
Right.
and that they had the same issues in other game systems, not just in fantasy back
Right, but it's very specifically you put a weapon in there that's a really good counter to having monsters. But what happens when a third of the games you play, you're playing against dwarves and they have no monsters whatsoever, and now my 400-point Duke can't do
my
anything.
super contextual item is not very useful. You are not wrong, sir. That is a different conversation. But I'm
but I'm saying
why does that silly rule exist?
It follows on from that core rule that says no hit with newspaper, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we've got two weapon options here. We have hand weapon, which is just strength user, AP 0, no special rules. Not true. It now does have a special rule. If you're infantry and you have a shield, you can parry with your hand weapon, and then you get the +1 armor save. Hopefully everybody knows that.
Yep, and it says right there, all models are assumed to be equipped with hand weapons.
Yeah.
All models.
Now, then there's two hand weapons or additional hand weapon. This does not work the way it used to. When you use an additional hand weapon, you're not like adding an additional attack with a different weapon on top of whatever you're already using, where in previous editions you could have like, I'm going to have a magic sword, I'll use most of my attacks with this one, and then I'll have additional for one attack with my left hand. That's not how it works. If you use additional hand weapon, you just get +1 extra attack, but you have to do all of them at strength user AP 0.
Yeah. Yep, and the problem with that is almost everybody would rather take a shield and get the benefit of parry or and such. So it's rare to see this actually used in the game, except for a few units that this is their only option. In which case they will do that, but for the most part, don't see it a lot.
Yeah, and then the vast majority of units that do have some kind of special one-hand weapon ability, like for example the ensorcelled hand weapon, it does not work if you take additional hand weapon, and it doesn't even work for the first attack, like say, so Chaos Warriors with their ensorcelled hand weapon could have one attack that's AP 1, but if they do additional hand weapons, they have two attacks that are AP 0. In some cases, that's actually worse.
In most cases, that's worse, and which is why almost nobody ever takes it. So even though a whole bunch of units have that option, it's typically the elite units that have that option, and they'll never take it because most now have a type of magic, whether it's a Gromor weapon, whether it's a ensorcelled weapon, whether it's a Choppa or something, and so forth and so on. Typically, it's if you take that additional hand weapon, you have one attack, but you lost the cool army-specific bonus of the weapons you had on that elite infantry, which is why nobody ever uses. Rarely ever uses them.
A great example of this is that Minotaurs would love to have additional hand weapon, but they lose their ability to get AP 2 with their regular hand weapon if they use it. So instead of having AP 2 with 3 attacks, you can have AP 0 with 4, and that is definitely worse.
Now, I see why they would do this or why the original book was released this way when there was, I'll take, the additional attack versus, let's say taking a shield, right? So you're choosing one more attack versus one less defense. But now taking the shield gives you plus the parry save with infantry. It's so much better.
Yeah.
Now it's even worse to not take this. I think they should just revert that. I think they should just say, no, if you have some sort of other ability or it's sorcered or whatever, you just get one more attack. And then I think we'd actually see it used, because right now, no one ever takes it because it's totally not worth it.
It would very much impact 2 units. It would impact Minotaurs a lot, and it would impact Chaos Warriors a lot, and both of those units are not very good and could use some help. So very happy. I would be very happy to say, If you have a hand weapon ability, it applies to your second hand weapon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Feels like it should. Yep.
Okay,
Anyway,
so
moving on.
next up, we've got a flail, which used to be a really great weapon, and then they changed how it works, so it doesn't work exactly like this anymore. It's strength plus 2, AP2 with armor bane 1. That's not here, but it was added in the FAQ. And then it says instead of it being first round of combat, they changed it to be only when you make a charge do you get the strength and the armor bane part of it. So it goes from being there's now 2 profiles: strength plus 2, AP2, armor bane when you charge, and when you don't charge, it's strength user AP2 requires 2 hands. That's it.
Yep.
So it
Then
does
what are you
give you
charging?
AP2 if you don't charge, but it does not let you and this used to be the case, especially for Marauders, for example, is they would just have a big block of guys with, with flails, and you charge them, and then they hit you with strength 5 attacks, which would be very, very good. And I believe
Mhm.
that after the 1.51 updates, they were like, I hate charging frenzied Marauders with flails, so I'm going to nerf all of those things. And then they got rid of all of that, and it's kind of sad.
Yeah, but it's still just as effective on the charge itself. But of
Yeah.
course, infantry don't typically want to charge less because then you don't get your second rank to attack as the fighting rank. So pros and cons, right? But again, this comes back towards okay, well, you could take shields with the unit still, right? And so if you're going to get charged, you use your shields. If you don't want to use your flails, right? It depends what's charging you, but it's still just effective on the charge. So I'm glad that they are making more nuanced difference between benefits of charging versus not charging. That's good. The argument of maybe they went a little bit too far in nerfing how effective things were on the charge, especially for infantry. I think that's totally fair. Again, I think it would be different of um, it feels a little bit worse for infantry now than cavalry in particular because you also lose the second rank. So it might be worth an additional balanced reflection in the future from GW. But we'll see. We'll see if in January or whenever the next update will get FAQ, whether they'll make some tweaks. Don't
Yeah.
know.
So then we have great weapons, which are one of the better weapons, especially for characters and then units, stuff like that, because we've got strength plus 2 AP2, which is always active. So you don't have to charge, you don't have to only first round, anything like that. It's just always active.
Yep.
It
Yep.
also gets armor bane 1,
Yep.
which is cool. So then every 6 to wound is an AP3 now. And it
Yep.
requires 2 hands, which a lot of time isn't that big of a deal because you're already, riding a dragon or whatever, and you don't need any more armor, so you don't need to use a shield. And it has strikes last. Now, strikes last is supposed to be a big minus and big negative. It only
It's really
does
not.
anything if you die before you get to attack. If you don't die, you just hit harder, and then you have no downside at all.
Yeah, I actually think the Great Weapon is one of the biggest mistakes in the game right now. It's substantially too good. There's a reason why everybody takes it. It's almost an auto take. Oh, my unit can take great weapons. I'm going to take great weapons. And my problem is no one ever, ever, ever takes if my Chaos Warriors, I can take great weapons or Halberds. I'm going to take the great weapon every single time. Oh, my Chaos Lord, I can take a great weapon or a Halberd or whatever. I take the great weapon every single time. I believe they made a mistake in this edition, and they made the great weapon too good. In fact, it's so good, no one ever takes. Often, the other weapon options are ignored because of how good the great weapon is. I think too much of the game has devolved into either taking hand weapon shield or you're taking a great weapon.
Yeah.
I think that's a big problem. I think the other weapons are so interesting and so compelling. Either they need to make them better, or they need to make the weapon worse, or maybe both of those statements need to be true. But too much often the game becomes I'm either taking hand weapon shield or take both.
Yeah.
And then you swap during the round of combat. It's just too good.
Well.
It's
So
too good.
just to be clear, who uses great weapons? Well, a Night Goblin war boss who's riding around on a squig who has like 4 wounds or something. So you charge into him, you do 3 wounds to him. Good for you. He's still alive. He gets to make all of his attacks with his great weapon now. So he did exactly as much damage as if he didn't have strikes last. There's no difference there, right?
Yeah. Yeah, the problem is, or the Chaos Lord, who cares? Or you charge a big brick of infantry, and okay, cool. They now have 2. You killed 4 of them. Awesome, cool. They have 2 ranks that are going to hit you back with 6 to 8 attacks of great weapons. So they don't care that they lost those 4 or 5 models or whatever. It's just too good. I think it should have either been. The problem is it has both the strength and the AP. That's
Yeah.
the problem. And the downside of striking last is not meaningful enough. I think it's fine strike last as is, but it shouldn't give you +2 strength and 2 AP. It should have been something lesser between those. So you would actually, should I take the Grey Weapon or should I take the
Well,
Halberd? But it's too
in
good in its
particular,
current
Mike,
form.
there's a massive disparity between, let's say, great weapon, wielding infantry and hand whip and shield or spear wielding infantry, because strength 3 AP 0 attacks are like 7 times worse than strength 5 AP 2 attacks versus most of the good things in the game. And so
the delta is too big.
So it's because you are getting a multifaceted differential. You're getting better strength, so your ruling to wound is better, and you're getting better AP, which means you're better at the armor save. So, and very often high toughness things have good armor as well. So it's like you very often need both of these things. It's kind of an anathema. It's good against everybody, right?
So they either need to make great weapons worse, or they needed to make the other weapons better.
Yeah, in my personal opinion, it should actually work more like 40k, where the Thunder Hammer has a -1 to hit. So if you get this +2 strength AP2, cool, but you also have to have -1 to hit your enemy. Now, what'd be great about that is it would actually make elite units want to take great weapons and crummier units not want to, because when you have weapon skill 5, for example, and you're hitting people on 3s or 2s, then you don't mind the -1 to hit as much, and you still want to take your great weapons. But then, like, the poorer, peasants and stuff wouldn't just be way better off with great weapons because they wouldn't be able to hit the side of a barn. So, you know what I mean?
And there's differentiate to point. And one could make the argument, well, a lot of those weapons are typically only 1 point per model to upgrade, which the great weapon is 2 points to upgrade. But again, as Evan just pointed out, it's a delta of like ×6 or ×7 of how much more effective the great weapon is in the hands of anything in the versus
and every unit
weapon.
that's buying a great weapon goes from 6 points per model to 8. So it's only like 25% more points to get like 5 times as much damage.
Right. It's not double the output because it's 2 points versus 1. It's like 5 or 6 the output. So anyway, it's an oversight. We'll see if anything comes up in the January FAQ. It's not the biggest problem in the game. It's not really a big crisis, but I'm just pointing it out to everybody. Hey, it's like, why? It seems kind of obvious I should just take great weapons. Yeah, because it is. Yep.
So then there's Halberds. Halberds are plus strength +1 AP1. They still require 2 hands, so they still have that negative where if you have a unit of these in particular, why don't you just have the great one? The only difference is that you don't have strikes last, so that's it.
Who cares?
Yeah, there are units in the game that have special Halberds that let them fight in 2 ranks with them, and those are only barely as good as a great weapon, maybe. So like Phoenix Guard, for example, having those 2 ranks of guys who get to fight with their halberd.
But to your point, if that was baked in, okay. Like I said, like if all halberds if my Chaos Warriors could fight in 2 ranks with halberds, okay, I might consider it now because now they're more effective on the charge. I get 2 ranks, versus the 1 rank. But again, it's just honestly, I think it should be fighting 2 ranks with halberds, and the great weapon should have like 1 less AP.
Yeah, something.
I think it should be both.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just too much better.
They did FAQ halberds that when you charge with a halberd, you get AP2 instead of 1, so that's interesting.
Yep. Totally not enough to care about it. Guess what? I still get AP2 with my. That's the problem. It's not enough. The delta between the weapons is not worth it.
Right. Well, they just are very much of the opinion that strikes last is a massive negative, and it is unless if you just don't die. So if you're a Graveguard and you're toughness 4 and you have a 5-up armor save and a 5-up regen save, then strike last. I don't care.
Yeah.
It's also not a big deal for Graveguard if you have 500 different ways to stack initiative bonuses where you're initiative 6 even though your strikes last.
Or just different things. But to your point, great weapons are typically on the elite units. The elite units are not going to fold like paper. So the striking last is not actually applicable in the situations that it comes up. So anyway, let's move on from that rant over. Let's move forward.
So Morning Stars are something that almost nobody in the game has.
Yep. Or even knows it exists.
Yep. It gives you strength +1 AP1. And now they changed this one as well. It's kind of like a mini flail, so you only get it when you charge. Bretonnian characters can buy these.
Yep. And they never will.
Yeah. There's whips, which are basically just spears. So you just have fight next to rank, but you get strike first. The only units in the game that have whips are like handlers that are like the Skaven handler guys who stand behind. And it's like, okay. I don't know.
And fighting an extra rank is cool, but having no AP makes it almost an auto. I wouldn't take.
Yeah. Choice. Technically, this is actually better than a spear or thrusting spear because you get to fight next rank even when you charge. So if you could somehow have a whole regiment of guys with whips, you would actually be cooking with gas over here.
I
But
know, but they're pretty rare. So
yeah, so the fact that they're just arbitrarily not allowed to be given out to people is interesting.
they're really just a flavor thing because there's very few game units in the game that actually use it. Maybe in the future we'll see more like Slanesh units or maybe Dark Elf units if they become Korrigan, or other armies might see more of them. But right now they're just very rare in the game.
So then we have spears. Now they
Yep.
say here, nice. Spears were once called the king of weapons. They were. Spears are the best weapon before gunpowder that ever existed, but not in Warhammer Fantasy because they don't understand how stats work. Um, so
Yeah.
lances are fine. They give you the strength plus 2, AP 2, armor bane 1. So basically, it's a great weapon that you only need to use with one
Well,
hand.
slow down. People are confused. You just talked about spears, but there was no
Right.
profile there. Why was there no profile there?
Because they're actually just giving you an entire section of different kinds of spear.
Oh, so they're doing that whole thing where they use the same word
Same
twice.
font.
They're using the word to say here's a category of weapons called spears, and then there's spears within the spears. Just like we have our monsters within the monsters. I hate that they do this. Don't get mixed up by it. That's all that it's just saying. So technically, they're saying all these things below are spears. That being said, I don't think there's any rule in the game that says, "Hey, buff any type of spear weapon," and this category of spear actually is relevant. And maybe there is something I can't think of it.
Yeah, you know what'd be amazing
Um,
is if you could just say, all spears get reroll 1s to wound or something like that. That'd be fantastic.
yeah, but that doesn't exist.
No, it
So I
doesn't.
think maybe they had an intention to do that, but they certainly haven't released anything in the game
Sure.
right now. So don't get mixed up by it.
Okay, so we have lances. They give you plus 2 strength, AP 2, and armor bane 1. They don't have strikes last or requires 2 hands. So it's a great weapon without those downsides. However,
But there is one disadvantage.
So you have to be mounted. So you can't run around with a lance on foot, and you have to.
Makes sense.
You can only use it when you charge or when you count as charging. So like if you follow up after someone falls back in good order. If they use shield wall and they give ground 2 inches, you don't get to keep using your lance for the next round. It's still very good
So that
because almost
feels
always,
good. Yeah.
almost always these units have the high movement and swift strides. They can make those charges, but
Yep. And you expect lances to be super good, and they are super good.
Yeah.
But again, the biggest balancing factor there is only if you charge.
yes,
Right.
definitely.
That's the biggest thing. And there are times like, oops, I got charged, or oops, I didn't break the enemy. I'm still stuck in combat. So that actually feels significantly more balanced than the great weapons themselves. Yeah.
For sure. And then this is where countercharge, the special rule, comes in a lot because if you have lances on your units, then you either need to be charging or you need to be able to countercharge. Because if you just get to countercharge 1 inch, that's fine. You still get to use your lance, great. But if you don't get to countercharge, like if you are Chaos Warrior, Chaos Knights from edition before 1.5, and you didn't get to countercharge, you were just terrible. You were like, oh great, I have a pool noodle. Cavalry
Yep.
spears are just worse than a lance, except that you get to fight an extra rank when you don't charge, which I think every single person forgets that that's how that works.
Well, not many units have cavalry spears, and in particular, even fewer units have cavalry spears and have more than one rank. The one that comes to mind is Boar Boys. That's the most likely one where this will come into play. Very other few units in the game actually would this be applicable, but it's pretty cool that you can fight in that extra rank.
Yeah. So cavalry spears are just strength plus
Except
1
when you
AP1.
charge.
So you can very clearly see that these are highly influenced by the stats that used to exist in Warhammer Fantasy, which was strength plus 1 that also gave you AP. It was just all under one banner. And now instead, they've broken it into 2 separate things, but they still made both of them go up by 1 in each section, which still gives you this quadratic equation of lances are 4 times as good as spears, like because you get both bonuses, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So you still have to be mounted for this. That's pretty simple. The one thing they did break apart is they broke a spear, which used to be just all 3 of these things were a spear. Now it's like actually different names. So some units have the option to buy a throwing spear or a thrusting spear, and you don't have both. You only have one of those 2 things, which is kind of weird.
Which confuses everybody. And again, there's not that many units where this is applicable. But let's go through the difference. What is a throwing spear, Evan?
Well, first of all, a throwing spear is not a ranged weapon.
That is so confusing. What do you mean it's not a ranged weapon? It says I throw it.
Yeah, what they're doing here is a throwing spear is like the plumbata that the Roman military would use, where the heavily armed legionnaires would charge towards the enemy, and while charging, only a few feet away, they would all throw a bunch of missiles at the enemy, and right as those missiles were impacting, they would pull out their swords and fight. That is a throwing spear. It is not a javelin, which is a different weapon that like skirmishers would use and throw and then run away. It's a
So it is confusing. I get why they call it a throwing spear, but it sure would have been better if they had called it something else, because that's just confusing.
yeah.
All right. So what does it give you?
Well, what it does is it gives you strength of user and AP 0, so that is a hand weapon stats, and then you have fight an extra rank when you're charging. When it only works when you're doing the charge.
Okay. So, but you're not going to get your shield and parry bonus. So you're almost never. Don't think I've seen anyone ever take this once in this edition.
Oh,
so
you know what's funny,
maybe.
Mike? I just suggested people do it when we were talking about Savage Orcs, because Savage Orcs have frenzy, so they're charging all the time. Infantry, when it charges, only has 1 rank of attacks, and Savage Orcs are probably going to have a crap load of dudes. So that's actually a unit that might want to have throwing spears, because you charge in there, you get 2 ranks of guys who get to attack, and that actually increases the number of guys who can swing for things like losing men to dying on the front rank. So
but still, that's very specific.
It's just orcs and ungors that I know of that have like the option to do this. The other one that has it, Mike, is war dancers can pick throwing spears or thrusting spears, I think.
Yeah. All right. So thrusting spear. What does a thrusting spear do?
Well, it's the exact same thing. It's strength user AP 0, and you have to fight an extra rank. But this one only works when you're not charging. Why not just have this be one thing and just get rid of all of this text? Just fight an extra rank all the time. Screw it.
Yeah, and I get they were. If I get the desire to create more nuance and variety of the weapons, that's cool. But the difference in strength, like the special rules here, and the output of these weapons is so little.
So bad. Yeah.
For the things that are using it, it's so bad. There's just no reason to justify these being 2 different profile entries. So they are in this edition. I really wish they would buff these up so that people would take them. And there's a really strong, good reason to take them. 1 extra rank is not enough of a reason compared to most of the other weapon options. You will take this when you have no other.
Yeah.
That is what people are going to do.
So thrusting spears do give you +1 initiative when you get charged in the front.
Cool. Don't care.
This is a problem because the charging unit that just charged you gets +3.
Yeah.
So my +1 is, unless if I'm an elf, this does nothing.
And the vast majority of everything in the game is initiative 3 or 4. Almost everything in the game is initiative 3 or 4.
So that +3 for charging is just going to totally dunk on any +1 bonus.
Totally make this irrelevant all the time. Exactly right. Like these were not well designed, unfortunately. So hopefully this is something that they will address. I don't think they're going to address them.
Yeah.
We're going to have to wait till edition.
Remember, whips have strike first. Why don't so a spear? Okay, here's how I would redo the spear. Spear, combat, strength user, AP 0, fight an extra rank. Get rid of all of these contexts when that doesn't happen. Comma strikes first. So you have.
I think you still need AP 1. If a spears were fight an extra rank, strike first when you were charged in AP 1, now we're talking. That is something that I would like. Okay, that is something that I would want to take.
So there is this danger, Mike, where if you give spears AP 1, then doesn't every single combo weapon in the game have it? Basically, like, you know what I mean? We've already gone through every single weapon. Yeah. So other than hand weapon, everything would have it then.
That's the problem. Right now, using a hand weapon shield with the parry save is so much better. I will never take the spear. Right. They need to make spears better.
Well, you should tell that to my 9-point per model High Elf Spearman or my 14-point per model Eternal Guard.
They need to be better. They need to be always strike. Well, if they didn't have it, always strike first if charged in the front, and it should be AP 1.
Yeah,
100% it should be.
So far from being the king of weapons, the spear is actually one of the saddest weapons there is. And by the way, there are characters in the game.
Close to the worst.
There are characters in the game that have the ability to buy spears, and characters cannot fight if they're not in the front rank. So the only thing they would get is +1 initiative.
Yeah. So I think they just didn't focus on this enough. Hopefully they'll focus on it.
But Mike, this is how Warhammer Fantasy was always. Spears were always strength user, and then every single unit that has a spear is strength 3, other than basically all of them are. And then also,
that's the thing. The spears are not on the elite units. Spears are on the rank and file chaff, and the problem is they're terrible.
So
That's the
spears
problem.
are supposed to be a weapon that is, first of all, really easy to use. So it should actually make like bad units like better. Like for example, it would not be out of the realm of possibility for a spear to say you always hit on a 4+. That
Yeah,
wouldn't
but
actually be that bad of an
historically,
idea.
what's the spear is supposed to be historically? Hey, you do not want to charge the unit that has
Right.
spears.
Right.
Ouchie. Right? That's what it's supposed to be, and
Yeah.
it's just not.
No, it's not whatsoever. Okay, but we can criticize the system for a lot longer than.
Let's move on.
I think that the missile weapons have way more that makes sense about them. So first of all, if you have more than one missile weapon, right, you can only use one of them. And the entire unit has to use the same weapon. And remember, the entire unit has to shoot at the same target.
Yep, people get confounded and frustrated and confused with this all the time. There's only one exception to this, and this is where if it's a wizard casting a magic missile spell,
Yeah.
he can target different things if he's in the unit. Every other time, if I have my dwarf with the pistol or my elf with the bow, these are all characters. Nope, you have to shoot the same thing the unit is going to shoot. I'm like, but Mike, I don't want to shoot the same thing. I want to shoot the dragon or the character, and then I want my unit to shoot the other thing. Nope, sorry, you're not allowed to do that.
Yeah, I know. Okay, so
Would have been
bows.
nice.
What's cool about bows is that the bows are strength 3, but that's actually not as bad as it could be. I think in Lord of the Rings battle game they're strength 2.
Yeah, as long as you get a lot of shots, they're fine. That's
Yeah,
fine.
and longbows have armor bane 1, which is a big deal. I think because a lot of the time you with strength 3 you actually are wounding on 6s, so basically the same thing as having AP. So if you're trying to shoot down a necrosphinx or whatever, 30 inches is actually a big deal as well because this means your short range is 15, and because charge ranges are very often in the 15, 17-inch range, longbows often mean you're going to have that +1 to hit for close range because they're actually going to still be 15 inches away before they charge you or whatever. Whereas the regular warbow with 24, actually you're usually either at long range or you're in combat, and then you don't really get to be.
Don't get confused. Bow is the category like spears, so you technically don't have a bow.
It does it again.
You have either a long bow, a short bow, or a war bow.
Yes.
I really wish they didn't do that, but they did. So here, that it is what it is.
Yeah, and it's look, it's the same text point as well.
Yeah. Very frustrating.
Okay, so longbows have armor bane and volley fire and range, all very, very good things. A short bow lets you move and shoot, which is cool.
Yeah,
and
that's awesome.
It has short range. Now,
well, move and shoot without a penalty. Just to be clear, you could move and shoot a long blow. You just take a penalty to hit.
Yeah. So the short bow for the goblins or Illyrian reavers, for example, you can move and still fire. However, unless if you move into the short range, you might as well, like if the target's 15 inches away and you move and then shoot at it, the short bow has -1 to hit, and with longbow you have -1 to hit. So it only really helps you if you move and fire at someone who's 9 inches away now. So
yep, but volley fire is the most important thing on this thing. What does volley fire do for you, Evan?
So you get to have half of your models in the second and further ranks back get to fire as well. So if you have like a big unit of archers, then the front rank can fire all their arrows, right? And then the second rank can fire half, which is actually pretty significant because crossbows, for example, don't have that. Yeah.
Yep, and you take these big bricks of 20, 30, depending on whether they're goblins.
Yeah.
Right? It is like, oh, suddenly being able to attack, you're not just attacking with 5 shots or 10. You could roll up to 15 plus dice, 15 shots, and hey, you roll enough dice, good things are going to happen.
Okay, and then we have a war bow, and this is 24-inch range with volley fire. It doesn't have quick fire, it doesn't have armor bane, but it does have strength user. Too bad no unit in the game can get strength 4 until recently. The Creation hunters have strength 4 and have war bows. But until when it first came out, like orc boys, I really thought that they would just make it so that the big guns with war bows would have strength 4 arrows, and they said no because big guns is only in combat. I don't know why they did that. But it's strength.
It's orcs like punching things. That's why.
But it's the same muscles you use your muscles.
No, orcs like punching things, Evan.
Okay, you use your muscles to. Okay.
No, punching things.
And then we have another section that is black powder weapons with the same font as the things below it. Great.
Yep.
Multiple. We got handgun. So this is if people don't know, this is not a modern handgun, which is a semi-automatic pistol.
This is a flintlock pistol.
Yeah, this is a musket, basically, if people are unfamiliar.
Oh, yeah, that's the musket. Right.
Right.
I think the confusion is that they say handgun and then pistol. I wish if it just had said musket, I think that would have been
So the
made
reason
more
why it's
sense.
called handgun is because it was also called hand cannon, because it started off as having cannons that people couldn't carry around, and then was all of a sudden a single user could wield an actual gun. They called it a handgun because you could hold it in your hands because it's small enough.
Yeah, yeah,
That's why it's called that. Um,
I get it.
so it has 24-inch range, which is actually relatively far. A lot of people incorrectly believe that muskets and early firearms had terrible accuracy and terrible range. Not that bad. Not compared to a bow or anything. Like they're relatively similar to bows in terms of their range and accuracy. Now they're stuck
Yeah,
at strength 4, so it's not based on user because it's just based on the chemical power
strength
of
four
your
is great
gunpowder.
though.
Yeah, and it gives you the AP1, which none of the weapons so
Love
far
it.
have had any, so that's pretty good.
Yep,
Armor Bane 1, so on a
also
lucky
good.
hit, you get another one. Ponderous,
Hmm.
which sucks. Ponderous is if you move, you're -2 to hit instead of -1, which means you
Yeah,
can't hit the
don't
side of a
move.
barn.
Yep. So this is where we mentioned it before. All special rules are not good. There are actually a bunch of special rules that are penalties. This is one of them.
Yeah, and people constantly confuse ponderous and cumbersome. This is the one where if you move, you have -2. That's that one.
Mm. Yep. So again, by default, you can still move and shoot every weapon in the game unless it has
Yeah, move
often a
or shoot.
special rule that says you can't. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Then we have pistols. Now pistols are shorter range, only 12. Still the same
Yep.
damage profile, so they don't do any less damage, and they have quick shot
Yep. Still
instead of
hurts.
ponderous. So it's like the inverse.
Punchy.
Um, that's great for units that can move around quickly and just fire off pistols at people, like pistoliers, for example,
Yep.
or outriders.
Yep. Very good. Pistols are great.
So
Not a
braced
lot of units have
pistols,
them in the game.
yeah, braced pistols, it makes a lot of sense. It's exactly as if you just had 2 of them. So you have multiple shots 2, and everything else is the same.
What's the problem with multiple shots too?
You get -1 to hit for firing 2 times.
Okay, so it's not a good thing. So it's a good thing that you get 2 shots, but you still get a penalty to shoot. So
Well,
there
the
is
problem is that when you're ballistic skill
a
3,
problem.
you almost always are now hitting on 6s instead of 5s. So instead of hitting on a single shot with 5+, you have 2 dice hitting on 6s, which is
Yeah.
basically worse.
Yeah, and I think part of the biggest challenge in the game is they don't want Warhammer: The Old World to turn into 40K. We don't want it to become a big, shooting game, which it still can become with enough war machines. It's still a problem. So they have all these penalties to hit in the shooting, and we cover that in
Yeah.
the other beginning guide. But the problem is, so many things are ballistic skill 3, and you have so many penalties to hit. It feels very imbalanced. Nobody anything that is not a war machine because it is
Yeah.
so unreliable. All right, so that's why in this edition, right, it just the ranged weapons are not as good as they should be. I would rather have their less penalties to hit or higher ballistic skills so they hit more often, but I don't necessarily do as much damage. I don't break armor as much, right, or don't have as much strength. It would feel a lot better having more things hit even if they didn't all kill. So, but that's something that maybe the rules designers will look at in the future.
Well, I think, Mike, the main reason why the shooting doesn't work very well is because the vast majority of the missile units are like, for example, Empire handgunners, who are ballistic skill 3. And because they're ballistic
Yeah.
skill 3 and they don't fire in multiple ranks or anything, it's like you need so many points worth of crappy dudes who can barely get a line of sight to fire their weapons. And even if they do, they might need to move where they get -2 to hit because they have ponderous. And then they get
Yep.
to fire at long range and hit on 6s with 5 dice. Whereas there's like the repeater handgun wielding outriders, which are like 5 times better because they're both skill 4 and they have multiple barrels and they're cavalry and they're skirmishers. So it's like there's a big feast or famine with shooting, which is just some units are terrible and other units are pretty good, and the pretty good ones show up
Yeah.
to the table, right?
Yep. But the vast majority of them are terrible and we never see them, which
Yeah.
is a shame. I'd like to see more of them. So hopefully that will be addressed at some point.
So then we have the repeater guns. Actually, we did jump over it. The brace of pistols gives you extra attack in combat.
Which is cool.
Unfortunately, it does not give you strength 4 AP1 in combat, where it would be amazing for pistoliers if they could charge in and just use their pistols in combat.
In previous
like,
editions, it did that,
shoot
where
you.
basically they would basically
Yeah.
shoot them at point blank range. They've decided in this edition, nope, that's too good, and they took it away.
I hate that.
That's
I
a
hate that
shame.
so much.
Yeah.
I especially because pistoliers were impetuous for a while, and it was like, so I'm
Hey,
never gonna fire
pistols,
my gun.
that was the reason why to take a pistol versus a handgun. Why am I taking a pistol versus a
Yeah.
musket? Because I could shoot it at point blank range, even in combat, which was amazing. I really don't recall it being that abused in the previous edition, so I'm really surprised that they took it away in this edition. I hope it comes back because that's the reason to take a pistol over a handgun. It's
It
still
also
good in
just
combat.
feels right.
It's just fun. It's just fun. Yeah, point blank. You know, I
Yeah.
love it. It's great. But all right, it is what it is.
So repeater guns. This is the repeater handgun I was just mentioning. Now, multiple shots 3 is not like multiple shots 2, because if you are a
Yep.
6+ to hit, but you have 3 times as many shots as 5+ to hit, that now you're coming out ahead. Multiple shots 2 gives you the same -1 to hit penalty, but it only gives you twice as many shots, right? And then this is
Yep.
just way better. So every time you get multiple
Yep.
over 2, it's just so much better. Now they do have ponderous, right? But everybody that has these generally has other options as well, which is
Yep.
pretty good. And they still have the exact same damage profile as a regular gun, so they're not firing like a smaller bullet or anything.
Yep.
I also
More
think
shots is better.
you could help balance the game as well, Mike, if the repeater had like 18 inches instead of 24. So if there was a reason for the handguns to like be a thing,
Yeah.
and not the repeater
I
just
agree.
being way better, that would be
I agree. That would be create a more interesting choice versus an auto take.
yeah.
Because
And then
right
the
now the
repeater
way
pistol,
the rules are designed, and there's if you can take a repeater handgun, there's no reason to not do it.
yeah, for sure. Then the repeater pistol, same thing. It's the same exact damage profile, except it has 3 shots and quick shots. So you can, for pistoliers, take the champion with a repeater pistol. If every single guy could do it, that would be obviously
That'd be
just
cool.
technically better. But yeah. Okay. Then we have crossbows, another section that just covers multiple kinds of crossbow. So a crossbow.
Except there is a crossbow section or crossbow section, and there is a crossbow. This is why I'm so frustrated in how they label their
Yeah.
categories.
So a regular crossbow, or what you might call a heavy crossbow, that's what I would probably call it. If you were going to be all technical and
There are a
annoying.
lot of ways they could have solved this.
Yeah, so it has 30-inch range, strength 4, armor bane 2. So it's basically like a handgun, but you got extra range, and for the trade-off there, you don't have AP, you have armor bane instead. Now, that sounds worse. It's not. Here's why it's
Crossbows
not.
are great.
30-inch range means you can actually shoot people who are 25 inches away when the handgun cannot. And because you're ponderous, you do not want to walk forwards to then shoot. So you really just want to have more range. Right?
Yep.
Armor
and
bane
often
2.
you're going to need those 6s to hit anyway, or
6
to wound, right? Yeah.
So then it's exactly the same.
So-
So if you're shooting at toughness 6, a crossbow and a handgun do exactly the same thing.
Yep. And that's typically where you want these to go. If you can plunk off a wound, it might only be 1 or 2 from that big monster. It's totally worth it. It makes a big difference when they get into combat if they have 1 or 2 wounds left. Or if you're shooting at heavy infantry or elite infantry, then it's a different story. But crossbows are awesome.
Yeah. I think that so if people are ever wondering, and what's funny is it's usually 2 points to buy a handgun for a soldier or 1 point for a crossbow, and crossbows are probably better. So
Depending on the situation.
Yeah. Then we have repeater crossbows, which are totally different. These are basically just dark elf weapons. That's pretty much the only people who have them. They're 24-inch range, strength 3, AP 0. They've got armor bane 1 and multiple shots 2. So this should be really good, but it's not.
It's not.
It's very sad.
Why?
It's very sad
Why is
because
it not
multiple
good?
shots really erases your chance to hit the side of a barn. And I would rather be strength 4, armor bane 2, than be strength 3, armor bane 1, and just not be able to hit anything.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's just a symptom of the addition. I don't think that's a symptom of the weapon. That's a symptom of the addition. If it had been the exact same profile it is right now, but it didn't have the -1 to hit for multi-shot, okay.
Yeah,
Now
sure,
we're talking.
okay. Potentially.
But it doesn't.
Yeah, and so what happens with Dark Elves, you're like, oh my god, I'm so excited. I get 20 arrows. Oh, I did nothing. Because you're like 20 dice, and you just, they're all 6s to hit, 6s to wound. You get 1 wound through, and they pass the save. You're like, oh, why did I do this?
Yeah. Yeah. Symptom of the addition.
Definitely.
All right, moving on.
Handbow. Equally terrible.
Peter handbow.
Yeah. Actually, no, it's worse.
I mean, is it a witch hunter who has this? Like,
no,
who
these
has
are
this?
also dark elf weapons still.
Oh, okay.
So these are
So,
the Black Art Corsairs have these.
Okay.
And so you can have infantry that's open order, not skirmish, has light armor, and then has a 12-inch range multi-shot 2 weapon that they can fire and do no damage and then get murdered. So
That's an awful weapon. All right,
Pretty
let's
much.
move on.
although it does have the brace of repeater handbows is multiple shots 4, but you can't give your whole unit that. So
Just for the champion. Yeah,
Yeah,
whatever.
something like that. And it's like if maybe if you could give a whole unit that, that'd be kind of funny. Like just so many arrows.
Maybe.
Okay, next section is everything that gets thrown.
Except throwing spears, which are
Yes,
not thrown, but are
they're
thrown.
not.
Yeah, let's move on.
So throwing weapon is just you have a rock or a stick or a knife or something with multiple shots to move and shoot. Now the funniest one about these is you have like Noblars or you have what the Skaven Night Runners and stuff,
Hmm.
where you just have a bunch of random nonsense. And for a little while in the game, when you could fire with all of your ranks against a large target, you'd be like, here, eat like 70 rocks and sticks and piles of garbage and see what
Yep.
happens.
But now they took that away because they're like, oops, that was too good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But range 9 sounds like, okay, sure, I get close. But then remember, you still have long range penalties. So actually, you're like 4.5 inches
Yeah.
or else, right?
Yeah, and that's where again I think just in general, thrown weapons or anything with these very short ranges just shouldn't have that long range. Again, it's just it's already so risky and dangerous and difficult to get that, and then on top of that, you're still not going to.
Yeah.
Very frustrating.
So javelins, on the other hand, can be quite good because you got a 12-inch range weapon, so you can still get within 6 inches for a short range attack. Move and shoot
Hmm.
and quick shot. Now, move and
Yep.
shoot doesn't mean move and shoot. Move and shoot means
Nope.
march and shoot. You can
Yep.
march and shoot.
Yep. Don't get confused.
Yes.
Yep. So which is good. So you could march and you could shoot and not have that penalty, and then cool, you're still free and you're still going to have no AP. Still going to at most kill one model.
Yep. Now this is what skinks have, and when poison was actually good, that was a very oppressive profile on
Different
a 5-point
story. When
model.
you have poison, very different story.
Yeah,
Yep.
but then they made poison terrible, and now it's like, well,
They didn't make it terrible. They did nerf it meaningfully, but it's
yeah.
not. It's still worth taking.
It
It's just
feels
not an auto
very
take.
bad, Mike, when you have 14 point per model Wood Elf archers with poison, and you roll a 6 to wound or 6 to hit, and then a 2 to wound, and you're like, oh,
Yeah. Well, the problem was not that they nerfed poison to fix some of the imbalances of the game. That was good. The problem is the units inherently, like the Wood Elf unit, points around having poison.
yeah.
Their points were not reduced to reflect the reduction of poison. That is the problem.
Yeah, so it wasn't that poison on skinks and glade guard were a problem. It was that poison
Mhm.
banners
Or
on
night
skeleton
goblins.
archers were a
Yeah.
problem.
And night goblins, and
Yeah.
versus
But
volley
that's
fire
but that
poison
was a
versus
that
the
was an
monster.
item that gave your unit the ability,
Right.
not the actual rule that regular other
So
units got to have access
they
to.
addressed the big problem, but the way they addressed it was not surgical. It was with a hammer, and unfortunately had a ripple effect to units that were not guilty of causing the problem. But yes, but that anyway.
Right.
Moving on.
So then we have slings. Slings were the menace for a while because you had the gutter runners with poison. Again, we've got poison
Yep.
again, and now multi shots too. And the gutter runners had ballistical
Yep.
4, so you had a high ballistical unit with a lot of poison shots. And hey, 18-inch range, a little bit better than something like
That's respectable.
yeah. So that was good.
Yep.
And now they're kind of bad again. So yeah, whatever.
Yep. Yep.
Now throwing axes on the other hand, I think these are perfect. Chef kiss. Actually no, it needs AP1 because I just really
It needs
I
AP
love
one, and it needs AP1, and it needs not a long range penalty.
Yeah, so the units that can take this have a hard time ever getting in range because remember, every individual
Yes.
model needs to be in range or else they have the long range penalty
Yes.
and all that crap. So it's
I mean,
hard
for
to
the most
get
part,
people
it's
in
like you can
range.
put it on your Marauders on foot. Well, cool, that's going to do nothing. Or you could, it'd be different if you could volley
Yeah,
forces, right? If I could have 20 Marauders and okay, rank and then half the other ranks, now we're talking has a chance of doing something. It should have had volley fire for.
yeah, I don't
Or
disagree.
if throwing axes had volley fire and if they had 1 AP, awesome. And now my Marauder Horsemen would love to take them, and they'd actually dance around and whittle things down over in skirmishing fast cavalry Marauder Horsemen. But it doesn't have that. So effectively, cool. I'm going to spend all these points and maybe do 1 point of damage, and it's or one. It's just they're not effective. They're not effective.
Right.
I wish they were.
Okay, so armor, relatively simple, or maybe it isn't. Now, a lot of people get this wrong. You start with the armor you're wearing. You only wear one set of armor, and it's just one of these three things. That's it. So,
Does everything in the game start with armor?
no,
Like everything in the game starts with a hand weapon?
no.
No.
So, I know people are like, oh my god, these guys have light armor. That's worthless. technically that is better than nothing, and it is something that you get that other people don't get.
Mhm.
And it gives you a save. So light armor gives you a 6+, heavy armor gives you a 5+, full plate gives you a 4+. Then you get to add bonuses to this, but the bonuses are separate things than your armor value. Your armor value starts here, and they just get bonused. Okay. So for example,
Mhm.
parry is a bonus to this, and so is a shield.
Mhm.
So if you have no armor, you start with a 7+. The reason for this is because if you have no armor but you have a shield, you then get a 6+. Because you started at 7, you got a +1.
And one thing to also clarify about the armor they did in the 1Q, the biggest thing is unless you have to be to get to a 2+ armor save, you may only get that if you are infantry or you're cavalry. If you are riding a monster, no luck. You can never get better than a 3+ armor save. You can only get a 2+ if
Right.
you're on basic cavalry or you were infantry. So that is an important update.
Okay, so then here are the additional equipment. These are two things that give you a +1, and they never get you better than
Yep.
2+ on infantry cavalry or 3+ otherwise. And so there's the shield. The shield gives you a +1 to your save. The
Yep.
shield gives
Pretty
you
good.
another +1 to your save if you're using a hand weapon and you're parrying and you're in combat, but that's incredibly complicated. So there you go, right? A lot of these conditions you got to jump through. Also, it only
Mhm.
gives you +1 if you don't get better than a 3+. So if you have full plate armor and a shield and you're on foot, you got no parry save bonus. You're just stuck at 3+, right? Um, then there's barding. So if you're riding a horse, usually that has barding, gives you +1.
Mhm. Yep.
Um,
Pretty
cool.
straightforward.
And so basically, barding is better than a shield because it just gives you the +1, and there's no other requirements.
Now, it doesn't list them out here, but the other things that typically do improve your armor, which is basically a different variety of barding, is typically skin, or it will be thick hide or something else. And these are typically on things and such, or on lizardmen, you
Armored hide, yeah.
specifically say, you know, thick hide 4+, or right? There's a difference. Some of these are just replacements to armor, like on a dragon, it will say like dragon scales or something. 4+ counts as full plate armor. That specifically says, oh, it just counts as full plate armor. It's representing its scales. But if you might have on, let's say, a lizardman, let's say a cold one, what do they have on that?
The cold one has armored hide 1, which is kind of supposed to feel like they have barding, basically.
Right. So it's just a different flavor of that. So there's a few. This isn't actually all the armor potential things in
Technically,
the game.
yeah.
There are some other things that are out there, but just to explain them, effectively, it's either going to basically act like your full plate or heavy armor. It's typically almost always going to be one.
Yeah, and then there's all those magic items that give you +1 to your armor save, like the dragon helm for high elves or the troll hide trousers for the orcs, where it's just
Mhm.
on top of every other thing, we give you +1.
Yep, those are magic items.
Okay, and then the final and last thing is wizards can't wear armor except for all of the times where they are totally just allowed to do that and they give you exceptions to it.
Hmm.
This penalty, and then if they do, they can't cast or dispel at all.
Yep. So womp womp. So
So guess
basically,
what?
don't ever put armor on your wizard.
Well, you can't.
Yep.
Unless if he's a
Um,
vampire. The vampire lord is the only model in the game that has the ability to be a wizard and has the ability to buy armor, but can't do both without, because every other model that
yep.
has both has a special rule that says, I don't care about this.
Yep. So, for instance, you're a chaos sorcerer. You're like, wait, Mike, my chaos sorcerer lord wears chaos special armor. Yep. And they have a special rule in the armor book saying, yep, Mr. Chaos Sorcerer Lord, you get to wear armor and
Yeah.
spells. It specifically says that in his rules. That's not the only one. Catha has one, and there's some others out. But for the most part, wizards can't take armor. Period. And if they some reason could, then you can't cast spells. If you put a armor on a vampire, take a vampire, make him a level 1 wizard, and then you put armor on him, he cannot cast spells.
I guess the only
That
reason
makes
to
me
do
super
that is
sad.
if you really wanted your vampire to be the general, so you had to be a wizard because the general had to be a wizard, and then you also want him to just fight people, so
Yep.
you made him a wizard so he could be the general, and then also didn't let him cast because he's wearing armor,
I
which is
think my
stupid.
vampire
But
should just be able to wear armor and cast spells like he always has in the past.
and then we could just delete this stupid thing.
Yep. And then it wouldn't matter.
Yeah.
And because that's the only thing I can think of. All right.
Wow, this took way longer than I thought. But we went through all the weapons and how they work. And look, most factions use these weapons or variations thereof. There's a lot of cool weapons in the game where like Swordmasters of Hoeth have a special rule, but obviously they're heavily inspired on, okay, this is a halberd, but it gets to fight an extra rank, or this is a great weapon, but it doesn't give you strikes last. Like there's all these kind of
Mhm.
like just better than X versions, right?
Yep. Cool. And you also notice that the weapon and profiles are typically not in the unit entry. If it just says halberd or crossbow or handbow or whatever, you have to look at the core rule book. That's what's going to give you the profile of the weapon. They're typically not in the actual unit entry itself, because they didn't want to have to, if they update one of the core weapons, like they recently did in 1.5.1, they updated flails, halberds, and multiple things. They don't want to go back through every.
Yeah.
That's why they're basically common weapons and common
Yeah.
for that reason.
I don't disagree with that logic. I just disagree specifically with I think we talked about some of the missile weapons, and then specifically like spears and great weapons probably just need to be changed. But that's probably an addition to thing, because we're just gonna start diverging from what Warhammer Fantasy did for like 7 straight editions. We need to do something different, I think.
Yep, and I don't think they were ready to do that in this edition. They had many other battles to fight, and this was not the most important one. All right, we got to the end of weapons and armor. I guess we did both. Evan, any last closing words, sir?
I just want everyone out there to stay legendary, and hopefully, you can learn something from this section and play your rules right. All right?
All right, see you next time.